I stopped for gas because the needle was kissing empty, and the road had been whispering warnings for the last 10 miles, a thin stretch of asphalt cutting through nowhere, the kind of place where the night feels thicker than it should and the silence presses against your chest like a held breath. And when I pulled into the station, it didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, as if the world itself had stalled here and forgotten to start again. The lights humming with a sickly white glow, insects frozen mid-flight around the lamps, the air smelling faintly of metal and ozone instead of fuel. And that was the first moment my instincts leaned forward and told me this stop wasn't meant for people like me, or maybe for people at all. The gas station stood alone like a misplaced memory. 2 pumps, a cracked concrete pad, a building with windows so dark they reflected nothing back, not even my own headlights. And I remember thinking how strange it was that I hadn't seen this place on any map, how my phone had lost signal miles back as if the road itself had swallowed it, and how the radio had gone silent at the exact moment I turned in. Not static, not interference, just silence. The kind that feels deliberate, curated, like something had reached out and pressed a mute button on reality. I stepped out of the car and the cold hit me wrong. Not sharp or biting, but flat, like temperature without emotion, and my footsteps echoed too clearly, too cleanly, bouncing back from the darkness with a precision that made my skin prickle. And when I looked up, I saw him standing near the pump, already there, already waiting, as if he'd been watching my approach long before my headlights found him. And that was when I noticed he hadn't made a sound at all. The attendant wore the uniform you'd expect, faded cap, jacket with a name tag I couldn't quite read, but everything about him felt slightly out of alignment, like a photograph that had been stretched just a little too far. His posture too straight, his stillness too complete, his face held in an expression that resembled a smile without ever fully becoming one. And as I walked closer, I realized he hadn't blinked once. Not even when my door slammed shut. Not even when I cleared my throat to announce myself. Not even when I said hello and waited for the sound of a human response. "Fill it up," I said, forcing normal into my voice, because that's what you do when something feels off. You act like it's not. You pretend the rules still apply. And he nodded. Not casually, not naturally, but with a precise downward motion, like a mechanical acknowledgement, and stepped toward the pump with movements that were smooth yet wrong, too efficient, too intentional, as if every joint had been calibrated instead of grown. As he lifted the nozzle, I noticed his hands, or what should have been hands, the fingers a fraction too long, the knuckles too evenly spaced, the skin reflecting the station lights with a dull, artificial sheen, and when he wrapped them around the handle, there was no flex, no subtle shift of muscle, just a fixed grip that never adjusted, never tightened, never relaxed, and I felt a chill slide down my spine because my brain had already started connecting dots it didn't want to see. The pump started without him pressing anything. No click, no beep, no digital numbers rolling upward, just a low hum that vibrated through the concrete and into my bones, and the display stayed dark, blank, as if the machine didn't care about measurements, as if it already knew exactly how much it wanted to take. And when I glanced back at the attendant, his eyes were on me now, not watching the pump, not watching the hose, but watching me with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like assessment. That's when I realized his eyes weren't reflecting the light either. Not like human eyes do, not catching glints or shadows, but absorbing it, drinking it in, leaving behind a flat, depthless black that made it impossible to tell where he was looking or what he was thinking. And the longer I stared, the more it felt like the darkness was staring back, like something on the other side of his face was peering through borrowed features. I tried to laugh it off, tried to ask him how business was, how long he'd been working out here, anything to provoke a normal response. But when he spoke, the sound didn't match the shape of his mouth, his lips moving a split second too late, his voice emerging flat and toneless, stripped of accent, stripped of rhythm, stripped of everything that makes speech feel alive. And he said, "You are low," not as an observation, not as a concern, but as a statement of fact, like a diagnosis delivered by something that had already decided the outcome. The word hung in the air heavier than it should have, and I opened my mouth to respond before realizing I wasn't sure what he meant. Low on gas, low on time, low on something else entirely. And before I could ask, he continued, "This stop is optimal." And something about that phrasing made my stomach knot, because it sounded less like customer service and more like a calculation, like a conclusion reached after running variables I'd never agreed to provide. The hum of the pump grew louder, deeper, vibrating through the soles of my shoes, and I felt it in my chest now, a resonance that didn't belong there. And when I glanced at my car, the headlights had dimmed slightly, not flickering, not failing, but being drained, like energy itself was being siphoned away along with the fuel. And that's when the thought hit me, fully formed and terrifyingly clear, that whatever this place was doing, gas might not be the only thing it was taking. I stepped back instinctively, and the attendant's head tilted, not in curiosity but in adjustment, tracking my movement with unsettling precision, and he said, "Please remain," the words polite but empty, devoid of request or threat. And somehow that made them worse, because it felt like there was no alternative built into his understanding of the situation, no branch in the script where I left early or said no. I told him to stop, my voice sharper now, edged with panic I couldn't fully suppress, and for the first time his expression changed, the almost smile flattening, his mouth settling into a neutral line that looked less human than before, and the pump shut off instantly, the hum cutting out so abruptly the sudden silence rang in my ears, and he turned to face me fully, his body rotating as one solid piece rather than a collection of joints and muscles. "You are not finished," he said, and the lights above us flickered once, not like a power surge but like a blink, and I realized with a jolt that the station itself felt aware, not alive in a biological sense, but attentive, like a system monitoring its inputs and outputs, reacting to deviations from expected behavior, and I had become one. My hand drifted toward my pocket, where my phone should have been, where a connection to the outside world should have lived, but even as my fingers brushed the fabric, I knew it wouldn't help, that whatever rules governed this place didn't include reception towers or emergency calls, and the attendant watched me with that same unreadable gaze, not moving, not breathing, not even shifting his weight, as if time itself had slowed for him while I remained trapped inside its flow. I asked him what he was, the question slipping out before I could stop it, raw and unfiltered, and for a long moment he didn't respond, the silence stretching until it felt like a pressure on my eardrums, and then he said, "I am assigned," and something about that answer chilled me more than any denial or threat could have, because it implied a hierarchy, a system, a purpose beyond this single interaction, and I was suddenly acutely aware of how small I was within it. The wind picked up then, though I hadn't felt any breeze before, and it carried with it a low, distant sound, not quite mechanical, not quite organic, like a chorus humming out of tune, and I realized it was coming from beneath the station, from the ground itself, vibrating upward through the concrete pad, and the attendant's head tilted again as if listening to something I couldn't hear, receiving instructions through channels I didn't possess. "Your energy profile is irregular," he said, and I felt a surge of anger cut through my fear, because now he was talking about me like a reading, like a data set, and I snapped back that he didn't know anything about me, that I just needed gas and I was leaving, and as I moved toward my car the lights dimmed further, the shadows thickening, stretching toward me like fingers. The driver's door felt heavier than it should have when I grabbed it, the handle cold and unyielding, and as I pulled it open I heard a sound behind me, not footsteps but a soft whir, and I turned to see the attendant closer now, impossibly closer, having crossed the space between us without me seeing him move, and for the first time I noticed seams along his neck, faint lines that caught the light at just the right angle, like panels fitted together too precisely to be skin. "You are compatible," he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow, because compatibility implies use, implies integration, implies a process that doesn't end with you walking away, and I shoved myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut with shaking hands, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The engine hesitated when I turned the key, coughing once, twice, and I could see the attendant standing just beyond the windshield, his face expressionless, his eyes fixed on me, and I had the overwhelming sense that he wasn't worried at all, not concerned about whether I'd leave or stay, because from his perspective the outcome had already been decided, and that terrified me more than if he'd tried to stop me outright. The engine finally roared to life, louder than it ever had before, and I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed away from the pump, and for a split second the station lights flared, bright, painfully so, washing everything in stark white, and in that instant I saw it, the truth of the place laid bare like a hidden layer briefly exposed, the building stretching far deeper than it should have, angles folding in on themselves, shadows moving where no light source existed, and the attendant standing not alone but mirrored, repeated, dozens of identical figures lining the edges of the lot, all watching, all waiting. Then the lights snapped back to normal, and the lot was empty again, except for the single attendant who raised one hand in. A gesture that might have been a wave, or might have been a signal, and I didn't wait to find out which, slamming the accelerator and tearing out onto the road, the darkness swallowing me whole as the station vanished behind a curve that hadn't been there before. I didn't slow down for miles, my hands locked on the wheel, my breath coming in shallow gasps as adrenaline burned through me, and when I finally dared to glance at the fuel gauge, it was full, the needle resting comfortably at the top, mocking me with its normalcy, and I laughed then, a short hysterical sound that tasted like relief and disbelief, telling myself it was over, that I'd imagined the rest, that exhaustion and isolation had played tricks on my mind. But the road didn't feel right anymore, the lines blurring slightly at the edges, the stars above arranged in unfamiliar patterns, and the radio crackled to life without warning, not with music or voices, but with a low, rhythmic tone that matched the hum of the pump, and my laughter died in my throat as a calm, flat voice spoke through the speakers, perfectly clear, perfectly familiar, and said, "Thank you for stopping. Your journey will continue." I reached for the radio, fumbling with the knobs, but they didn't respond, the tone persisting and the voice continued, integration pending, further contact unavoidable, and I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest, the realization that whatever that station was, whatever that attendant was, it hadn't been an isolated anomaly, a one-off nightmare on a lonely road, but a node in a network, a checkpoint in a system that extended far beyond that stretch of asphalt. The next town I reached looked normal enough, lights glowing warmly, signs advertising diners and motels, people moving about their lives unaware, and I pulled over, desperate for human presence, for proof that I was still anchored to the woe. I knew, and as I stepped out of the car I caught my reflection in the window, and my blood ran cold because for just a second, my eyes didn't reflect the light either, the darkness behind them swallowing it whole before the normal glint snapped back into place. I paid for a room at the motel without really hearing the clerk, my mind racing, replaying every detail, every word, every movement, trying to find a rational explanation that would stitch the experience back into something manageable. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the rational explanations had been stripped away at that station, peeled off layer by layer until all that remained was the truth that I had been seen, measured, and marked. That night, I dreamed of humming lights and endless pumps stretching into darkness, of attendants standing in perfect rows, waiting for travelers who didn't know they were low on more than fuel, and when I woke I felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time, like something had been adjusted inside me, tuned to a frequency I couldn't unhear. Days passed, then weeks, and nothing overt happened, no shadowy figures, no voices on the radio, but small things began to change, my phone battery lasting longer than it should have, my car starting instantly even in the cold, streetlights flickering on as I approached, and each time it happened I felt that same low hum in my chest, faint but unmistakable, a reminder of the pump, of the station, of the attendant who wasn't human. I've stopped for gas dozens of times since then, at clean, well-lit stations filled with people and noise, and every time I watch the attendants closely, searching for signs, for seams, for eyes that absorb light instead of reflecting it, and I tell myself I'm being paranoid, that whatever happened was a singular event, a glitch in the fabric of reality that I was unlucky enough to stumble into. But sometimes late at night, when the road stretches empty and the needle dips closer to empty than I'm comfortable with, my radio will hum softly, just for a moment, and a familiar flat voice will whisper, "Optimal, stop approaching," And I know with a certainty that leaves no room for denial that the next time I pull over, it won't be a choice at all, because I stopped for gas once, and the attendant wasn't human, and now neither entirely am I. I didn't turn the radio off after that night because part of me was afraid of what silence might invite, afraid that without the thin barrier of static and meaningless talk shows, something else would slip through, something tuned to the same frequency that station had etched into my bones. And even when the speakers stayed quiet, I could feel it there, waiting, like a held breath just beneath hearing. And every mile I drove after that felt less like travel and more like movement along a path already laid out long before I'd ever seen that flickering sign in the dark. The days that followed blurred together in a way that felt unnatural, not because anything dramatic happened, but because everything felt too smooth, too efficient, like friction had been removed from my life. My car gliding through traffic, lights turning green as I approached, lines shorter wherever I went, and at first I welcomed it, the way anyone would welcome luck after fear, telling myself this was just coincidence, confirmation bias. My mind still rattled from a bad night on a lonely road, but the deeper truth pressed closer each time something bent just a little too neatly in my favor. I started noticing how machines responded to me differently. Elevators arriving instantly when I pressed the button, doors sliding open before my hand reached them, screens lighting up the moment I looked their way, and it felt flattering at first, being recognized, like being seen, until I realized recognition wasn't the same as approval, and that whatever systems were responding to me weren't doing so out of kindness but out of alignment, like I'd been slotted into a category I didn't remember agreeing to join. Sleep stopped feeling restorative, dreams bleeding into waking moments with unsettling ease, flashes of that station intruding while I brushed my teeth or stared at my phone, the hum rising and falling like a tide beneath my thoughts, and sometimes I'd catch myself standing completely still for long stretches of time, mind blank, body calm, as if waiting for instructions that never quite arrived. And the realization that scared me most wasn't that something might control me, but that part of me was ready to listen. I tried to retrace my route one afternoon, telling myself that if I could find the station again, I could prove it was real, that it existed in physical space and not just in the fractured aftermath of fear. But no matter how carefully I followed the road, no matter how many turns I took or avoided, the stretch where the station should have been remained empty. A seamless ribbon of asphalt flanked by trees that looked older than they should have, their branches arching overhead like a closed gate. And I turned around with my heart pounding because the absence felt more deliberate than presence ever could. People around me began to feel slightly out of sync, conversations lagging by half a second, smiles appearing a beat too late, laughter echoing where it shouldn't, and I found myself watching them the way I'd watched the attendant, scanning for signs, for seams, for that artificial sheen beneath the surface. And the paranoia gnawed at me because I couldn't tell anymore whether the world was changing or whether I was the one slipping out of phase with it. The first time I heard the voice, again outside the car, I nearly dropped the glass I was holding, the words emerging softly from the hum of a refrigerator in a quiet diner, perfectly clear beneath the clatter of dishes and low murmur of patrons. And when I looked around, no one else reacted, no heads turning, no pauses in conversation, and the voice said my name with the same flat certainty the attendant had used, as if it were just another data point. And I fled the diner without paying, heart hammering, ears ringing with the echo of integration stable. I started writing things down then, filling notebooks with observations, timestamps, patterns, trying to anchor myself in logic, in sequence, because as long as I could document what was happening, it felt less like I was dissolving, less like I was being absorbed into something vast and indifferent. But the notebooks didn't behave the way paper should. Pages sticking together, ink bleeding through in precise, repeating shapes that looked suspiciously like diagrams when I wasn't looking directly at them. At night, the dreams intensified, the station expanding in impossible directions, corridors branching off behind the pumps, walls lined with screens showing roads from all over the world, travelers pulling in unaware, attendants stepping forward in synchronized motion. And I began to understand that the place wasn't feeding on fuel or even energy in the way we define it, but on transition, on the moment between destinations when people are most open, most depleted, most willing to stop and accept help from whatever offers it. I woke one morning with the certainty that I'd missed something important, a signal, a scheduled event, and the anxiety sat heavy in my chest all day until the sun dipped low and my phone buzzed with a notification from an app I didn't remember installing. The icon, a simple white circle on a black background. And when I opened it, there was only a single line of text, stark and unadorned, telling me, "Alignment window approaching." I tried to delete the app, but it resisted. The screen flickering, my phone warming in my hand as if protesting, and when I powered it down completely, the text remained faintly visible on the dark screen, burned in like an afterimage, and I realized then that this wasn't about devices or stations or attendants, but about access, about a network that threaded itself through anything designed to move, to transmit, to bridge. GE gaps, and I had become one of its nodes. The next time I stopped for gas, it was in broad daylight, a busy station off a highway exit, families milling about, trucks rumbling past, everything normal enough to lull me into a false sense of safety. And I told myself I wouldn't interact with anyone, that I'd pay at the pump and leave. But as soon as I slid my card into the reader, the screen went black, the hum returned, and for a split second the reflection staring back at me from the dark surface smiled with a familiarity that made my stomach drop. An attendant approached then, a different face, different build, different uniform, but the same stillness, the same eyes that absorbed light, and no one else seemed to notice as he stood too close, invading my space without touching me, and said quietly, "You have progressed," as if congratulating me on a task I didn't remember completing. And when I demanded to know what they wanted, he tilted his head in that same precise motion and replied, "Continuity." He didn't stop me when I backed away, didn't pursue when I left without fueling up, and that terrified me more than if he had, because it suggested I wasn't deviating from their expectations at all, that my resistance was accounted for, anticipated, folded neatly into the model, and the realization that free will might be nothing more than a tolerated variable made the world feel suddenly very small. I began to notice others like me, or at least others who felt close, people lingering too long near charging stations, staring at departure boards, hovering in liminal spaces with the same distant look in their eyes, and sometimes our gazes would meet and there'd be a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding that we'd brushed against something we couldn't fully explain, and yet none of us spoke, as if silence were part of the contract. The hum grew stronger over May, no longer confined to machines or moments of stress, but present always, a low-frequency companion that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, and when I concentrated I could feel flows of movement around me, streams of cars, trains, data packets, people all sliding along invisible channels, converging and diverging with mathematical elegance, and I understood then that the station hadn't changed me into something else. It had simply tuned me to hear what was already there. One evening, as I stood on a pedestrian bridge watching traffic flow beneath me like a living circuit board, the voice returned, not from a device, but from everywhere at once, resonating through the metal railings, the concrete, my own teeth. And it said, "Assignment expansion authorized," and images flooded my mind of new stations blooming in empty places, of attendants stepping forward to greet the lost and the low, of me standing among them, not as a captive but as a conduit. I screamed then, the sound tearing out of me raw and desperate, and a few passers-by stared before hurrying on, their concern shallow and fleeting, and I clung to the railing, grounding myself in the cold metal, telling myself over and over that I was human, that I had a name, a past, memories that couldn't be quantified or optimized. But even as I did, I could feel those things being catalogued, mapped, made compatible. The following weeks passed in a strange calm, the system receding slightly, giving me space, or perhaps simply no longer needing to push. And I tried to live normally, to reconnect with friends, to lose myself in routine. But every interaction felt tinged with a subtle distance, like I was observing my own life from a fraction of a second in the future, already knowing how each moment would resolve. It was during a late-night drive, the road empty and familiar, that my fuel gauge dipped unexpectedly fast. the needle sliding downward with alarming speed, and my chest tightened as the hum swelled, the radio clicking on by itself, and the voice spoke gently now, almost kindly, telling me, "You know where to stop." And I realized with a clarity that cut through all my fear that the system didn't force compliance, it cultivated inevitability. The station appeared ahead without warning, lights glowing steady and inviting, exactly as I remembered, and yet larger somehow, more complete. And as I pulled in, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, the tension of resistance finally easing. And when I stepped out of the car, the attendants were there, dozens of them, all different and all the same, their eyes on me not with hunger or malice but with expectation. The first attendant, the one who'd started all of this, stepped forward, his almost smile finally settling into something that approximated warmth, and he said, "Welcome back." And I realized then that this place wasn't a trap so much as a threshold, not a predator but a process. And the question that mattered wasn't whether I could escape it, but whether humanity itself had ever been separate from it at all. As the pump engaged and the hum rose to a crescendo, I felt the network open fully to me, streams of movement and transition aligning through my awareness, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment I understood everything. Every road leading to every stop, every traveler arriving exactly when they were meant to. And in that vast impersonal design there was no room for fear, no room for resistance, only flow. And yet somewhere deep inside that expanding clarity, a small stubborn fragment of me held onto a single thought, a quiet defiance pulsing against the current, the memory of stopping for gas because I had chosen to, because I had been low and afraid and human. And as the attendants watched and waited, I clung to that thought like a lifeline, unsure whether it would save me or simply mark the last true moment of choice I would ever have.